As the French presidential election moves into its final stages, the French people are now reflecting on the nature of Nicolas Sarkozy's presidency. Known by the French themselves as Sarko the American, what many do not know is that Sarkozy's family ties lead directly into the heart of the American political establishment. This is the GRTV Backgrounder on Global Research TV. France's 2012 presidential election cycle is finally winding up this month as the country prepares to head to the polls this Sunday for the first round of voting. For the candidates, it's a time to consolidate their vote, energize their base, and rally their troops on the homestretch. For the electorate, it marks the end to what has been a particularly grueling campaign, one that has been at times surprising, salacious, and terrifying. Contrary to all expectations, the first major event of the French presidential election occurred almost 1 year ago, not in Paris, but in a New York hotel room, where Dominique Strauss-Kahn, managing director of the International Monetary Fund, and at the time a leading candidate in the presidential race, was embroiled in a sex scandal. Accused of sexually assaulting a maid at the Sofitel New York Hotel on May 14, 2011, Strauss-Kahn found his presidential aspirations scuppered as he was quickly arrested, indicted, and placed under house arrest. By July, significant holes had been discovered in the prosecution's account, and on August 23rd, the case was dropped completely, but the damage had already been done to Strauss-Kahn's reputation, and he had taken himself out of contention for the presidency. Although the media predictably chose to focus on the sexual nature of the scandal, a pattern of outside involvement in the affair formed a remarkable undertone to the story, one that fingered Sarkozy's campaign as the ones who potentially orchestrated the entire event. On April 28, 2011, just 2 weeks before the alleged incident, Strauss-Kahn was profiled in the French daily Libération, which noted he was worried his political opponent, Nicolas Sarkozy, would try to frame him with a fake rape. Subsequent analysis of hotel security cameras showed the hotel's chief engineer, Brian Yearwood, and an unidentified man high-fiving, clapping, and dancing in celebration after the incident was reported to the police. Right before the incident was reported, Yearwood had been in contact with John Sheehan, a security director for Accor, the French-based company that owns Sofitel. Sheehan's boss, René-Georges Query, was a close associate of Sarkozy's intelligence coordinator, Ange Mancini, before joining Accor. The first person to break the news of the arrest was an activist in Sarkozy's party, who managed to tweet news of the incident before it was even made public by the NYPD because, he alleged, he had a friend who worked at the Sofitel. Regardless of the nature of the allegations or how they transpired, Strauss-Kahn's political career was over, and Sarkozy had one less political heavyweight to contend with in his bid for re-election. The campaign took another unexpected turn in March of this year, when a series of shootings targeting French soldiers and Jewish civilians gripped France and drew the attention of the world. The shootings resulted in 7 deaths and 5 injuries in 3 separate incidents over the span of 8 days. When the gunman was identified as 23-year-old French Muslim Mohamed Merah, a narrative was quickly formed that this was a terror attack by a self-radicalized lone wolf, and comparisons were soon drawn to other spectacular terrorist incidents. Sarkozy himself likened the effect of these shootings on the French psyche to the effect the 9/11 attacks had on the American psyche. Interestingly, exactly as in 9/11 and the 7/7 London Underground bombings, details quickly began to emerge calling into question the official narrative of the attack. Far from a lone wolf or a clean skin, Merah was revealed to have been debriefed by French Internal Intelligence, or DCRI, after a visit to Pakistan in 2011. The fact that he had asked for a particular DCRI agent during his siege led many to question whether he had in fact been an informant for French intelligence, a possibility later confirmed by a source in an Italian newspaper article.
How was Merah, who was on welfare, able to arrange his 2010 trip across Israel, Jordan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and possibly elsewhere? Il Foglio's source claims that French authorities had struck a deal with Merah, freedom of movement in exchange for valuable information.
Despite the as-yet unresolved nature of these serious claims, what political commentators and journalists from across Europe and around the world noted in the immediate wake of the attacks was how the dramatic siege was likely to boost Sarkozy's political campaign. But now, as the French prepare to head to the polls and cast their ballot for the next president of the Republic, there's something more at stake than mere political grandstanding or prurient sex scandals. Instead, as scholars, journalists, politicians, and even the people of France have repeatedly pointed out, the presidency of incumbent Nicolas Sarkozy has been doggedly centered on catering to American interests abroad. In a decisive break with Gaullist tradition, Sarkozy has so doggedly pursued a policy of appeasement toward Washington that he has from the very outset earned the French nickname Sarko the American. What many don't realize is that, far from a simple moniker, Sarkozy's ties with the American political establishment are in fact quite real and easily documentable. In an explosive 2008 article, Réseau Voltaire founder and French dissident Thierry Maison traced Sarkozy's family lineage directly to the heart of the CIA. In 1977, Sarkozy's father, Paul Sarkozy de Nagyboska, a Hungarian aristocrat, divorced Nicola's stepmother, Christine de Ganay. Christine then married Frank Wisner Jr., son of famed CIA official Frank Wisner Sr., who established the CIA's Operation Mockingbird to implant controlled assets in the news media from the late 1940s. According to Maison, it was Wisner, Sarkozy's stepfather, who insisted that Nicolas install arch-globalist, Iraq war supporter, and humanitarian intervention advocate Bernard Kouchner as his foreign minister. Sarkozy's half-brother, Olivier, went with his mother Christine de Ganay when she married Wisner, eventually settling in America. Maintaining good relations with his stepfamily, including Nicolas, Olivier now goes by the name Oliver and was appointed as co-head and managing director of the now infamous Carlyle Group's Global Financial Services Group less than 1 year after Sarkozy became president of France. Earlier this month, I had the chance to talk to Professor Michel Chossudovsky, director of the Center for Research on Globalization, about Sarkozy's presidency and what these American ties mean for the formulation of French foreign policy.
Now, the other important dimension is how has Sarkozy served U.S. interests in the course of his first mandate of President of the French Republic. I should mention that France is an outgoing colonial power, and it is an outgoing colonial power in favor of the United States of America. And that's not recent history. That goes back to the Vietnam War. It goes back to the wars of Indochina. It goes back to the fact that France is being shoved out, so to speak, and wherever France had colonial interests or spheres of influence, the United States is coming in. It started in Vietnam, and it has extended more recently in sub-Saharan Africa and also in North Africa. And the question we have to ask ourselves, would a socialist president, e.g. the late François Mitterrand, have accepted that countries like Ivory Coast, Mali, Tunisia, or even Algeria enter into the sphere of influence of the United States of America to the detriment of France's traditional role within Francophonie, the French-speaking community of Africa, so that what we are seeing is an extension of American influence in the African continent, virtually everywhere, particularly in Central Africa, in West Africa, in former colonial territories of France, in Mali, where there's an impending fracture of the entire country following a military coup, and so on. So all these aspects, in my opinion, are significant in assessing the role of the French president, whom has all appearances of being a proxy of the United States, acting on behalf of Washington rather than in the national interest of the French Republic.
So given that Sarkozy is at least it seems to be acting as this type of agent of American influence in French presidential politics, do we see that reflected in the relations between America and France in recent years, especially after the acrimony that followed the Iraq invasion between America and France? Has there been something of an entente in those relations?
Well, that is a very important question. We recall the events of 2003 in the United Nations Security Council, where former Foreign Minister Dominique de Villepin, and that was in the government of Jacques Chirac, took a very firm position against the US-British stance in the United Nations, namely to get the UN green light and of course to invade Iraq. What we had in 2003 was a very firm alliance between France and Germany, the so-called Franco-German alliance, which was not only characterized by a political relationship, it was also characterized by the integration of the two countries' military-industrial complex. EADES, the European Air Defense System Corporation, was a joint venture between Deutsche Aerospace on the one hand and Aerospatiale Matra on the other. There were important links in the areas of banking and finance, and there were also links in the oil industry. So that essentially this Franco-German alliance was really the expression of a European project against the overriding influence of the United States in alliance with the United Kingdom. And that Franco-German alliance was broken in the wake of the Iraq War, and it was certainly broken subsequently with the accession of Nicolas Sarkozy to the French presidency in 2007.
As Election Day approaches, polls are showing that the French electorate is hungry for change, with opponents on both Sarkozy's left and right gaining momentum, while Sarkozy himself battles to hold his ground. A damning poll for the Journal du Dimanche last weekend showed Sarkozy with a 64% disapproval rating, making him the least popular president in the history of the survey. If he does indeed fall to surging socialist candidate François Hollande in the second round of voting next month as expected, he will be the first president since d'Estaing in 1981 to fail to secure a second term. In such an event, much ink will doubtless be spilled on the downfall of the once high-flying Sarkozy and his political legacy, but the French public, as well as the next president, would do well to understand the distinctly American tenor of Sarkozy's term in office. For the French people, after all, this election represents a referendum on Sarkozy's policies, as much as a chance to support alternatives. For more on this story, and other breaking news and current events, please go to globalresearch.ca. For more research and analysis by James Corbett, please go to corbettreport.com.